Today I want to talk about a topic that affects many of us in ways that are not always noticeable, but it affects lots of people. More than 13% of our population struggles with social anxiety. It affects people of any age, gender, race, or socioeconomic background. Even if you're not one of the 44 million people in the United States that struggle with social anxiety, you may know someone who does at your school, work, in your neighborhood, or at church. As a community, we want to embrace each other with compassion and understanding, which is why we're talking about this today. All of us had anxiety about something. Think for a moment about the last thing you were anxious about and how you felt at that time. The emotions, the tension or stress, the feeling of dread. Now, imagine any time you interact with a person, you feel that anxious. For a person with social anxiety, that is a lot of stress, a lot of the time. I've never thought of myself as an anxious person. As a mental health professional, I know that I have anxiety because of certain things that I do. We call it subconscious anxiety. For example, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which is anxiety-driven. Also, everything in my house, well, at least of mine, not speaking for my kids or their belongings in their room, but generally everything in my house has a place, and it's usually in its place. In times of stress, I like to organize things. It gives me a sense of controlling chaos, even if what I'm organizing is unrelated to the things causing me stress. My house was never more clean or organized as it was in the first part of the pandemic. All I did was clean. I'm going to share more about social anxiety, give you an example from the Bible, and discuss anxiety in general. But before I do, I want you to raise your hand if one of these is true for you. You hesitate going into situations where you might be judged negatively. You worry about embarrassing or humiliating yourself. You have a fear of interacting or talking with strangers. You have physical symptoms that you'd be embarrassed by, like blushing, sweating, trembling, or having a shaky voice. You avoid situations where you might be the center of attention. You fear offending other people. You yourself are constantly being critical and judging yourself. After a social interaction, you replay it looking to find flaws in your interactions or what you could have done better. If you raised your hand to any or a few of those things, chances are you may have social anxiety. If it's not you, you likely know someone who does, even if it would surprise you. Most people wouldn't guess that I do. I've always been a social person and an extrovert. The more the merrier was my motto for decades, until 2020. The pandemic was life-changing for many of us. A traumatic event is defined as a shocking, scary, or dangerous experience that can affect someone physically or emotionally. COVID-19 was a collective, worldwide trauma. We feared things we never knew we should fear. People weren't sure they'd have enough toilet paper, food, hand sanitizer, and nobody could get their hands on masks. I made some for my family, but we barely used those because we just weren't going anywhere. That fear-centered person was so opposite to the person I was. Normally, I'm a social butterfly, but I couldn't be around people. In fact, being around people was to be avoided at all costs. My friendships suffered. Many of them fell away, and still others faced conflict during that roller coaster of a year. Some of the conflict was due to differences we had around COVID and how we were socially distancing, and some were due of how we chose our pods or were excluded from them. During that year, I longed for things to go back to normal. Finally, a year into the pandemic, my kids went back to school. Things started opening back up, and I found myself dreading things getting back to the way they were. I didn't know how to do life with people in it anymore. I know that sounds crazy, but I had grown accustomed to doing things with just my little family unit and was used to not doing much at all. There was a definite resistance to getting back to normal, which surprised me. I had changed. Going back into public spaces, I found myself wrestling with confusing and competing thoughts. Like take masks, for example. Should I wear a mask to keep myself safe? Should I wear a mask to keep others safe from my germs? Should I wear a mask because it's socially acceptable? I don't want to be ruled by fear, so perhaps I shouldn't wear a mask. Or if I do wear it simply because I want to resist wearing one because I don't want to do what somebody's telling me something I should do. I didn't even know what my belief or desire was at that point. Part of myself was lost. I bet that's true for many of you as well. I started wrestling with fear of rejection, of being liked or judged or accepted or ridiculed or getting labeled something that I wasn't even sure I was or was not. I ended up not wanting to go out because of those fears, which is when I started realizing that I developed social anxiety. In short, social anxiety is a fear of social situations or of being judged by others. There's a more significant form of it called social phobia as well. There has been a huge increase in social anxiety since the pandemic, but it's not a new thing. People experienced it long before. It can be spurred on by any traumatic event like bullying, being teased, abused, or growing up with very controlling parents. It can also be brought on by any differences, especially physically, that draw undesired attention to you. To be clear though, social anxiety is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it was around before Jesus walked the earth. I'm going to read just a few snippets from the life of someone that may surprise you who most likely wrestled with it. Moses. Yes, the same man who led the Israelites out of slavery, parted the Red Sea, and received the 10 Commandments. Turn in your Bibles to Exodus 3. It's the second book in the Bible after Genesis. As an aside, next week we're going to start a sermon series in the book of Exodus, so you can bookmark this spot to use for the next few weeks. Exodus 3. I'm going to paraphrase the first several verses. Moses is standing at a burning bush, and the voice of God speaks to him and calls his name. Moses answers, "Here I am." The Hebrew word is hineni, which is significant because that word implies not only that you're present, but that you're ready and willing. Moses wasn't the only person to answer God in that way. Before Moses, Abraham had said that when God called him to sacrifice his son Isaac. And then again, when God called Abraham to sacrifice a lamb in Isaac's place. I'll come back to this in a moment. Back to Exodus. Moses is in front of the bush. God says that he heard the cry of the Israelites to be rescued from slavery in Egypt under Pharaoh's command. Let's start reading in verse 10, where God says to Moses, "So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you, and that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Now, I'm assuming Moses went back in his mind to the story of Abraham, the other guy who said to God, "Here I am," just like Moses did. And perhaps Moses started realizing Abraham was the founding father of faith, and the person who held the promise for God to make him a great nation. And maybe Moses compared himself to Abraham and felt he just didn't measure up. Because when Moses said, "Here I am," it showed an initial readiness. But then he started to question the plan, and his questions revealed doubt of his worth, his ability, whether he was even good enough to do this task. Moses was ashamed. That inner shame leads to having anxiety about being judged. And that feeling, fearing judgment from others, is called social anxiety. Further on in Exodus 4:1, we read, Moses asked, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say the Lord did not appear to you?" And in Exodus 4, he says, "I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouth? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." Moses doesn't want to go confront a great ruler who does atrocious things and lead a rebellion against him. I get that. Hard pass. Moses says he's not an eloquent speaker. He doesn't want to do public speaking. He's not alone. Public speaking is the number one fear people have. But as we see in the example of Moses, much of our fear is due to our insecurities, of measuring ourselves up against people who are better at things than we are. We read in Exodus that all these fears, seen as excuses of Moses, angered God. God assured Moses time and again that he would be the voice, that he would be there, that God would work miraculous signs. Moses responded with words of self-doubt and self-deprecation, which, in reality, expressed his doubts about God. God knew Moses' strengths and abilities, his failures and sins, and he said that he would give him the strength, the words, the power, everything needed to do the task God is asking of him. Moses is telling God, "You want to use me, but I am useless. I'm not good enough." How many of us create things, useful things? How would we like to be told that what we created is useless? My anger would burn too if something I made and I knew could do the job was questioned. Our Creator knows our capabilities. Our Creator knows our worth. All right, fast forward a few millennia today, back to us here today. Anxiety affects millions of people, and that number is rising, especially with younger generations. Some of the social anxiety of tweens and teens is explainable given that they're more socially aware and self-conscious at those ages. We all experience that in adolescence. But the increase in prevalence and in continued growth in the number of kids experiencing it may also be due to things like cultural and societal differences. I'm gonna do one of those cliche "when I was a kid" statements, you've been warned, but I grew up in a small town. The school that I was supposed to attend had 6 people at my grade level. Had I gone to that school, I would have graduated 6th in my class or better. But I didn't go to that school. I was bused into a central school that had 140 people in my graduating class. Likely, I wasn't in the top 6. My oldest child this weekend just performed in a theatrical production. It's given me an ability to brag about awards that I won in high school, the biggest being Drama Student of the Year for my graduating class. It was a win, yes, but remember, there were only 140 people in my graduating class. If I was compared to thousands of people in my peer group, I would not have received that award. Nowadays, with the internet, especially social media, kids have literally millions of people to compare themselves to. The pool of fish I was in was small. I didn't have to beat out hundreds of kids, but today, the internet is full of people that do anything and everything better than you. Even if you're great at something, you can find someone way better at it. That sucks. The other way social media impacts us negatively is that we post things that we're okay with other people seeing. In fact, we could call it a brag book. Look what I did. Look who I'm with. Look where I vacationed. Look how much fun I'm having. Look what I just ate. First of all, how self-centered we must be to post all that. Or really, as with most narcissistic tendencies, how fragile our egos are, that we need affirmation so much to post all that. Posts like that also develop a sense of codependency. We invest time into managing or caring how other people are going to view us. Not to mention, we turn and compare our deepest, darkest, most broken parts of ourselves to the practically perfect images of everyone else. And of course, feel like we don't measure up. We compare our worst selves with everyone else's best representation of themselves. Another thing that exacerbates social anxiety is pressure to do well and overperform. The pressure can be from bosses, teachers, or parents, or from within ourselves to live up to a star performer. We compare ourselves and worry that we don't measure up. Screens in general, not just social media, have impacted our mental well-being as well. We constantly use our electronics as an escape from boredom, from loneliness, from sadness. Instead of gaining coping skills, we distract ourselves with a device. Many of us haven't learned effective ways to handle negative emotions like boredom, so we avoid it. But avoidance is simply that. It's not dealing with the problem, which means we remain stunted when it comes to emotional skills. The way we learn social, emotional, relational skills are in the context of community. But post-pandemic, it's been hard for many people to engage with their community again. That is, if they had it to begin with. For many youth, and honestly, many of my friends, the last several years have also shaken up their faith. Many people I know haven't gone back to church in person or online post-pandemic, and some continue to question their beliefs or aren't willing to spend much time thinking about their faith for fear that they may lose it altogether. They're not alone. A study indicates that prior to the pandemic, 77% of Americans identified as Christian, and last year, that number was only 68%. Psychology is meant to be the study of our psyche, our spirit. Faith is seen as the support to individuals. Subscribing to a religion provides a sense of belonging and meaning and helps to make sense of our traumatic experiences or provide hope when we're suffering. This loss of religion is another reason people are struggling more with anxiety. Without our religious community, we feel more isolated and experience more distress. Spirituality helps by giving us a sense of peace, forgiveness, as though we are good enough, at least for God. It gives us hope and purpose. For many people, that faith still exists. It's what I call religiosity that they're walking away from. They believe in Jesus, but are uncomfortable with some of the ideology or constructs that have been put in place by institutionalized religion. They may simply have a hard time identifying or associating with that particular institution now. Walking away from something that is associated with our core beliefs, especially our faith, feels as though we've dismantled who we are. We need to put those pieces back together again, which is one of the best things that we can do for each other as a church community, to be that safe place to question, to doubt, to become more whole and healed. Help each other take away unhealthy views of religion and encourage each other to find authentic relationship with God and each other. A value here at Cornerstone is to live life on mission with each other to restore all things, including ourselves. In order to do that, it's important to figure out how to become whole again, to become resilient after the struggles we've endured. Resilience means we recover from difficult conditions. Part of recovering is working through the pain and suffering we experience, working through those negative emotions and discovering that even those negative emotions serve a good purpose. Let me break that down a little. God designed emotions to communicate something to us. Let's focus on the basic emotions and what they're supposed to spark in us. The feeling of happy. This feels good. I like this. Do more of this. Sad. Something important is no longer. I need comfort. Mad. This is not okay. This needs to change. Fear. There's a threat, a danger. I need to do something to become safe. When we pay attention to those feelings, we can make an informed, logical decision to act or fill our need, not just react impulsively to that emotion that was triggered. The process of understanding how to do this is gaining self-awareness. Emotional maturity is when we can have an emotional response to something that happens and understand why the emotion is triggered, but then we choose how to respond, not just react. We learn how to be responsible for our emotions because we have that self-control. When we are emotionally mature, we view emotions as important, not as a weakness or something we're ruled by or to be avoided. We can also then clearly communicate about these emotions and do what is needed to help us move on from them. The ability to do this whole process is called emotional regulation. It's one of the healthy coping skills and how we deal with uncomfortable or negative emotions. I say healthy coping skills because there are plenty of unhealthy coping skills. Distraction and avoidance, as I already mentioned, are some. Other unhealthy coping strategies are overindulging in food, work, sex, or anything in excess. Self-medicating or numbing, these strategies can also lead to addictions and ultimately do not lead to the processes of dealing with the emotions, which is precisely why they are not healthy. So let me talk about additional healthy coping skills. These can be things like mindfulness, to be present in the here and now, in what is. Taking care of our body, getting good sleep, eating healthy, exercising, they're some of the best ways to decrease anxiety. Also, relaxation and breathing exercises. Paying attention to your emotions and what they are supposed to communicate to us. Paying attention to thoughts, journaling, or meditating. Taking care of your spirit, participating in community with God and others, praying. Seeking out social support, talking with friends, family, perhaps a therapist if needed. These things can help us build that ability to push through the discomfort of anxiety. I want to read what was said about Moses long after he died in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 11, 24 through 29. It says, "By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned." In this passage, Moses is remembered as a man of faith. Do you get that from the verses we read about him earlier? No. What we read earlier made us realize that he was a man of fear or anxiety and self-doubt, but he pushed through that fear. I love that line. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. He was empowered because of his faith. He ended up trusting God enough to push through those fears to accomplish all he did. One of my favorite childhood lessons was everyone makes mistakes. That's why pencils have erasers. We're not perfect. We're not expected to be. We can merely accept ourselves as we are and push ourselves to grow into the plan for our lives that God lays out for us. I've got to tell you that my social anxiety is not fully resolved. My job is interacting with people all the time, so it's definitely getting better. But some days, I feel like I need to psych myself out to get up the door and get up and get out the door for work. It takes a lot of mental coaxing for me to return a phone call. And I often still RSVP to social get-togethers. RSVP no to social get-togethers. Do you recognize yourself in that? When a friend sends me a text that asks if we can talk, I immediately assume I did something wrong to hurt their feelings. I had this funny experience a couple weeks back. Our HR director came to see me, and my first inclination is questioning if I've done something wrong, not that we need to discuss someone that we're hiring. My mind just looks for ways I am not good enough. Since I'm a therapist, I've been working on this. I have to say the hardest obstacle for me has been trying to challenge those negative thought patterns and cycles. I literally just started working with a therapist this week to work on myself and to see if I can figure out how to stop those negative cycles of thinking. In part because I need to practice what I preach, but also because I don't want myself or anyone to be limited by fear. Let us be people who push through fear and accomplish great things and eventually be known for our faith because we, like Moses, know him who is invisible. For those of us who don't struggle with anxiety, social anxiety especially, I want to give some tools or guidance on how to help support someone in your community who does. The first thing I would say is be patient. The fears might not be rational. In fact, with all emotions, fear included, it's hard to keep the logical part of the brain from getting hijacked by the emotional part. You don't need to agree with the fear, but you can support the person. Focus on their feelings, validate them. Let them know it's okay to feel that way. We can absolutely help to shift their perspective, though. Our ability to be positive and not criticize them or what they're going through will help. If their emotions are intense, you can try to distract them. Suggest going for a walk, playing a game, or going to a movie. Encouraging each other to confront our fears, to have faith in God, our Creator, who knows our flaws and shortcomings, yet still has a plan and purpose for our lives, and to be able to remind each other of that promise is what we get to do here in community with each other. A person cannot remain in isolation and find healing from social anxiety. So I want to encourage each of you to take some action today. For those tuning in online, stick around and participate in the discussion after this message. If you're unable to, I encourage you to check out our resources on the website to learn more about social anxiety, anxiety in general, and other mental health topics. Push through any fears or hesitations you may have, knowing that God is with you. Most importantly, remember we are all works in progress. Pray for yourself and loved ones to know we are worthy and we have great value simply because God created us. He has a plan and a purpose for our lives. Will you pray with me? God, thank you so much for today. Thank you for all the examples that you give us in the Bible, but especially the life of Moses, knowing the shame that he felt, the not good enough he felt, and the ways that he wanted to be able to do your will, but hesitated because he got in the way. Lord, let us have that example. Empower us to be able to set our fears aside, push through them when necessary, so that we can do your work that you've set out for us, whether we know exactly what your will is, or if it's just one step at a time, going through each day at a time, confronting each fear at a time. Lord, allow us to come along and have compassion and understanding for others who have any mental health issues, especially anxiety. Lord, allow us to be a supportive community that encourages growth and healing and be able to have unconditional regard for each other, because you so graciously give us so much grace and forgiveness. So Lord, thank you for that. Thank you for everything that happens in our life to draw us closer to you, our fears included. Thank you for how they can be a gift to draw us closer to each other, closer to you, and ultimately becoming more of the person you created us to be. Lord, allow us to embrace your plan and purpose for our lives, and let us know that whatever happens, you are with us. Thank you for that, and thank you for Jesus. Amen.
Hey, wait, before you go, 3 things. First, consider becoming one of Cornerstone Fellowship's financial partners. Your donations will ensure that you'll be able to continue enjoying helpful and hopefully life-changing messages like the one you just watched. And then number 2, please share the link to this message with anyone who you know needs it or will be blessed by it, or by posting the link to your own personal social media platforms, all of them. And finally, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you'll be alerted whenever we post more content. Thanks for watching.